as soon as you lose your freedom, you lose your energy, you lose your enthusiasm for doing it. And they end up standing there looking at their painting like, oh my God, what do I do next? So my job as a teacher then is to kind of come and to kind of drag them back to the moment and say, hey, well, let's just play now. Because usually when someone's stuck, they're afraid to mess it up. So I say, hey, what would you do if you messed it up? And all of a sudden there can be this whole spark of energy again, which means adding things that might change it. You're not sure if you're going to like it, but you're going to respect everything that's there.
Hi everybody, Amir here. Today I'm joined by Stewart Cubley. Stuart goes back decades and specializes in the creative arts category of our retreats and specifically uses painting as a vehicle for personal growth. So I'm not very well versed in painting and using arts as a vehicle for personal growth. I'm so excited to welcome Stuart to the call today. I'm so excited to learn from you around your experience and what painting has to offer. Stuart, I'm going to do a terrible job of giving a professional introduction, but I know you've had years and years of experience and you've been a resident instructor with Omega Institute and others. Can you give us a little bit of your background?
Gosh. Well, I am ancient, by the way. I just turned 80, for Pete's sake.
Oh,
So talk
no
about
kidding.
being ancient.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And I've been doing this a long time. Gosh, close to 50 years now. So between 40 and 50 years. My original training was in math and physics. I got up to a master's degree in engineering and
So all the creative stuff.
all the creative stuff,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
got about a year away from my PhD. And I was at the University of Alaska at that time because I got drafted in the Vietnam War, and I refused induction and I hit the road.
Mm.
And so I was kind of a fugitive, and I went up the Alcan Highway, and I got to Alaska, and I figured they'd never find me in Alaska, right? And they never did. But anyway, I applied to the university there because I
Wait,
had
what's the
just.
statute of limitations on this? Are we past? Do we want to be talking about this in public?
After the war, they forgave the conscientious
Ah,
objectors, and they forgave the people who refused induction. So
okay, okay.
I'm
What
legal.
about people with bone spurs? I hear there's some people with bone spurs that
I
didn't.
tried that.
You tried the bone spurs line?
Yeah, I tried it. I did have to go and get my physical, and after I got drafted, and I said I had bone spurs, and they had a doctor there, and they didn't buy it. So I had to take the more radical route of refusing induction, which means at the very end of everything, and you've done your physical, and you're there with all these guys, and they line you up, and you're standing on this painted line, and they call your name out, and you have to voluntarily cross the line.
They're
And
not
if
going
you
to like drag you over it, like physically.
no, you have to, even though you've been drafted, you have to take the step. And
Oh,
I didn't take the step. And they didn't know what to do. There was a bunch of young lieutenants there and stuff, and they said, "Well, this has never happened before. What do we do?"
the Matrix is just like.
So they said, "Well, you can go, but you're going to hear from us." And so I left, and I hit the road, and I drove out to. It was in the fall, and I drove out. I drove west. This was in Brown University. That was in Providence, Rhode Island. And I drove west to Sun Valley, and I got a job in the ski resort, and I skied for the winter. And then that spring, I bought a pickup truck, and I headed up the Alcan Highway to
Mm,
Alaska,
mm,
which was like 1,300 miles of dirt road at the time.
mm.
And there were three of us that got started, and we had built a camper on the back out of wood. By the time we got to Alaska, we had 13 people in that truck. People that
Wow.
we'd picked up, hitchhikers and so on.
Also draft
12
dodgers or
men,
just
and
randoms, just random
random
whoever?
people.
Okay.
Yeah. 12 men and one young woman, and they were all hitchhikers. So anyway, that was my adventure from escaping from the draft. And
So you started a commune.
Well, not really. I actually got a remote piece of property through the state that had an offer for people to do that if they could get there, and I built myself a cabin. And I entered a period of introspection where I felt I was done with science. I was done trying to be a scientist. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew what I didn't want to do. And it was a time of transformation for me. And when I came out 4 years later, I had somehow let go of all that, and I didn't know what I was going to do. But
Mm,
I knew I was in at least in a more solid place in myself. And I wanted to. There was a spiritual teacher that I wanted to hear, who I'd been reading for years, and his name was Krishnamurti. And he was talking in Switzerland every summer. So I headed to Switzerland so I could hear him in person.
mm,
And while I was there, I met this French woman who was an artist, a painter.
mm,
And a year later, she was my wife, and we moved back to California, and we had a little apartment off of Haight Street, and I converted the bedroom. Every time we'd have a painting class, I would pull the mattress out and put it on the fire escape, and I would set up a bedroom, or I'd set up a studio in the bedroom. And to make it look like that was more popular than it was, I was an extra body painting. And and so I got started painting, and I never thought in any remote imagination that I would be a painter or that I would be interested in painting.
What year was this that the painting started on Haight Street?
Yeah, 76.
Oh, so for people that don't know, Haight Street is right in the heart of San Francisco,
Yeah,
in the heart of the hippie Summer
it
of
was
Love.
it
What
was
was the
the
Summer of Love?
the
20
summer of love,
74?
74.
Yeah.
And
Why do I know that? I don't even know why I know
that's
that.
pretty good. Yeah,
That
that's
was
pretty.
right on the money. I was born in 83. I have no idea. Okay.
It was the summer of
So
love
you
in
were
70.
right in the middle of it.
Yeah, yeah,
No kidding.
yeah. And so, yeah, we were right. It was after that, so it was no longer. It wasn't the height of the summer of love, but the whole energy was there. Haight Street had
Yeah.
all sorts of pot shops and all sorts of gatherings going on. So, so we started our painting class there in a third floor apartment, and we advertised in a new publication called Common Ground that had
Mm.
just come out, and people came, and one thing led to another, and it got more and more popular.
What was the angle? Was it pure painting, or did you have the personal growth piece of it
Oh,
at
it
that
was all
time
personal
too?
growth. It was
Uh-huh. Human
Michelle.
development. At that time, they
It
were
was
going with the
human.
human
It was
development.
it was human development, and
Yeah.
this was a period when there was a huge new interest in human in personal growth. And so, and being in San Francisco, right, that's where kind of the center of it. So,
Yeah.
so there was a lot of people who were interested, and after a couple of years, we moved to a larger location. I rented a larger studio where we could host people, and we had like 4 classes a week, and weekend workshops once a month, and trainings in the summertime that would last a
Wow.
week or two. And we had hundreds and hundreds of people who were interested in doing it, and so it became kind of a phenomena in the Bay Area. And we wrote a book at that time called Life, Paint, and Passion that got published by Jeremy Tarcher. And so when that came to a close, there was a shift after a number of years, and I kind of went my own way. We separated, and I hit the road teaching because the book had been published and there was all this
Mm.
interest in the work, and I was just going from one city to another around the country and setting up a studio and engaging people in the process. And that
So
included,
before this, Carl, I said we're going to go into like student teacher mode a little bit.
yeah,
So tell me an introduction to the work.
yeah,
Obviously, I don't even, with due
okay,
respect to the fact that you've written an entire book and hundreds of classes and all this stuff, but give me an introduction to
yeah.
your work and painting and how this
Let
has
let's
all come
assume
together.
let's assume, Amir, that you signed up for a workshop and
Mm,
you came. and you're not a painter, you might
I
not have.
studied finance.
Yeah, yeah.
There we
So
go.
you studied finance. Your background is not in art, but you were intrigued enough to sign up for the workshop for some reason. Maybe somebody told you about it. So you would come. There'd be a group of people, maybe 15, 20 people, and we would sit in a room in a circle or whatever the environment was. We would have a talk before, and basically my job there is to make you feel at ease, because especially if you don't have experience painting, you're going to come in and feel, oh my God, what's expected of me? Am I going to be humiliated? I don't know what I'm doing. Is this safe? Am I going to be
Right.
judged? Right.
Yeah.
All those
Oh yeah,
questions.
yeah.
So my job is really to put you at ease and let you know, hey, this is a safe place. You're not going to be compared to anybody else. There's no standard. There's no evaluation of what you're doing. It's going to be about the experience itself. It's different for each person. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. We have a few uh, rules of the road that we observe. For example, we treat the space with respect. We treat the other people with respect. We actually paint in silence.
Mm.
Although I'll be talking to you or other people as we proceed, and depending upon the need, but we don't have casual conversations going on. So that way, people can really focus on what they're doing. And once we go into the studio, the paints are all set up, the tables are in the middle of the room. People are painting on the walls vertically. You have your own piece of paper there on the wall. Next to your paper is a pouch with all your brushes. So you have all of the everything you need to get started. And we essentially say, begin. And so you would be there in front of your white piece of paper without any idea of what you should be doing.
So there's no IKEA manual to tell me like step one. You just say
Yeah,
begin.
I've got an IKEA manual. So I'll tell you the first step in the manual is to be willing to not know, embracing not knowing, embracing that emptiness where you truly don't know, and you're not going to try to assume you know. You're not going to try to fill that emptiness with something artificial just so you're comfortable, but you're going to be willing to not know what you're doing.
Mm.
Then, number two in the IKEA manual is once you give yourself permission not to know, a space opens up in you. And you want to actively engage that space. And so the second principle is listening. If you're willing to not know, you're going to notice there's a natural attention that is there. There's a natural curiosity. There's a quality of listening. You're saying, okay, I don't know what to do. What do I do? So you're open to what might happen. There's a quality of listening. And if you engage that listening and it's authentic, something comes to you. Something shows up. You're standing there in front of your piece of paper. You don't know what to do. You're not giving any instruction. No one is going to judge you for what you do. And you notice other people are in the same predicament. They don't know what they're doing. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a moment where everyone is very present, right? To really not know what you're doing and be expected to do something, but you don't know what. There's a quality of attention and heightened energy.
This reminds me of when I graduated school. I went through my master's program, and it was all said and done years ago. And I went into career, and then career turned into entrepreneurship. I always did well in school academically,
Mm-hmm.
particularly with standardized tests, finance, accounting,
Right.
formulas, that kind of stuff. And there was right and wrong answers. And so I thrived in that environment. And so for me to transition into eventually what became entrepreneurship was challenging
Yeah.
because I was so identified, and we can go into like childhood stories around me being the golden boy, bringing home good grades and getting away with murder as a child
Yeah.
because my family valued academics and da da da. And so I was so identified with being able to like provide or produce the right answer.
Yeah.
And when the real world doesn't work that way,
Yeah.
there are competing priorities. There are oftentimes two bad options, and there's just a lot of life is messier.
Right.
And so that led to a lot of anxiety for me,
Mm-hmm.
and not being able to spot the right answer and say it's the answer is C and
Mm-hmm.
is it right or
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
And so we never had the arts, we never had growing up in my family. And so I can imagine that going through an experience like this earlier in life or at any time in life would be hugely valuable to step out of that right, wrong, left brain sort of ability to then be present with what you were
Yeah.
saying, like what arises and what
Yeah.
comes up, and to achieve a certain level of comfort with that.
Well, yeah, and also to be open to contacting other dimensions within yourself. In other words, when you allow yourself to not know and you're open to what might arise, um, things do arise. Our imagination is very, very active. It's very strong. It's going on most of the time anyway. We don't. It's just that we don't acknowledge it, and we don't give it credibility. So that's really the next challenge when you open the door to your imagination, is to give it credibility instead of dismissing it, instead of judging it immediately, which is the first impulse, right? The first reaction was, "Oh no, not that." Or, "Oh no, that's not enough," or "That's not good enough," or "Oh no, I've done it before," or "Somebody else has done it before." There's a reflexive tendency to negate the activity of the imagination.
Mhm.
And so that's the next challenge, in a way, is can you give credibility to your imagination? If a color arises, you're standing there, you don't know what to do, you're saying, "Okay, it's time to start." And you look at the table and there's 20 colors out there, but you'll notice that the brown seems to attract get your eye. Do you trust that? Do you trust taking that color? Or do you have to equivocate and say, "No, no, 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 maybe not brown, maybe it should be something else?" And so how much do you do you value the immediacy of your own intuition? Okay, and then if you do trust it, you pick up the brown, and you you have this blank piece of paper. You have no idea what to do. You're been given no instruction. And you look around the room, and people are maybe starting. They're all doing something different, so it's not like there's a right way to do it. So you again have to you have to fall back on yourself to trust that that brush wants to be called somewhere. That it feels more energy if it's going to this location than this location.
Mm.
That it feels more doable to do a circle than it does to do a straight line at that moment. Or even if an image comes to you, because look, I mean, we dream in images. Our psyche is full of imagery. Uh, and so, do you dare trust that you could do an image, given that you've never been trained, that you're not trained?
Mhm.
And that's another challenge in the process, right? Is being willing to say, "Okay, I see a face. Do I do? I don't know how to do a face. It's going to be so stupid, this face. But what part of the face do you see first? Oh, I see the eyes. All right. Do I dare? Where are the eyes? Well, if I did them, they'd be over here. Do you dare do the eyes? Do you dare be present enough, instead of saying, "I don't know how to do it, so I'm just going to whip it up there"? But do you dare to be present enough to slow down and make some eyes?
And then when
And
you
you,
do it, So that's the courage piece. So clearly, people aren't coming here as part of their formal training to go into the fine arts, right? This is
Well,
a personal growth journey.
yes,
Yeah.
it's a personal growth journey. People who have formal training are handicapped
It's more
because,
technicians.
yeah, they can rely on their technical ability, and they don't have to listen internally as much. Whereas somebody who's not trained is doesn't have that to rely on, so they have to listen. They have to confront themselves more directly.
And then once you have the courage to draw those eyes,
Yeah,
can you face it?
yeah. Once you've done,
Can
you
you
face it.
accept? Can you accept the output of what you've done?
Yes, and that's really the next challenge: is can you accept the form those eyes have taken? Because it's so easy to judge and say, "Oh my God, I don't know how to do eyes. Look at their different sizes. They're stupid." But you say, "No, I did them. I'm going to respect what I've done, and I'm going to listen to what's next." And maybe you see the hair, and you say, "Well, that's crazy. I couldn't just do the eyes and the hair. Why not? Might be really cool to have the eyes and all this hair around it." And so you listen to what comes to you, you respect what comes to you, you dare to act on what comes to you. And a process then is initiated in which you are on a road, you have no idea where it's going, but it's pretty cool because it's talking to you. And every time you do something, it sort of gives you the hint of where to go next. And you might change colors, or you might change the size of the brush, and you might have a different image come in. There might be more than one person or whatever. And so you're going along and you say, "Hey, I'm getting the hang of this." And then usually, not all the time, but in every painting, usually there's a time in which you are going to be challenged. You're going to reach the end of the road. You don't feel like you've finished, but you don't know what to do. And you feel you, how should I say, there's a difficulty arises. It's meeting difficulty. And sometimes people, I guess the challenge here is to look at difficulty as part of the journey rather than a failure.
The Joseph Campbell had one of those, and what is it? The obstacle, or what's it called? In the
I,
hero's journey, he's got
in
this.
the hero's journey,
You've got to face the monster.
you gotta have the monsters. Yeah, in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, the monster shows up, right? That's the whole mythology of monsters. He was reading as being really a dialogue on the creative process,
Mm.
on the internal spiritual process that people go through. So there's the monster, there's the difficulty. There's you're going to be challenged in a deep way. And so then if and my job as a facilitator at that point, or whoever's facilitating, is to recognize it and encourage somebody to stay with it, to let all those feelings come up, but to remain respectful of what you've done. Because the temptation then is to exit out, tear it off the wall, think the next painting will be better, whatever, or just feel like this is not for me and leave. So to respect the process, to respect yourself enough to stay with what you've done and respect what you've done, so that you're going to add to it rather than cover it up or get rid of it, is a powerful moment, because you are willing to say, "No, I'm having all these feelings, but I'm going to stay here. I'm going to
So I
keep."
get the painting to a point where I get blocked, and I no longer have a clear instructive of what to do next, a clear
Yes.
vision of what to go, where to go next.
Yeah.
So you're saying rather than start over or scrap it,
Yeah.
stay with it
Oh yeah.
and use that as your next starting point to see
Yeah.
what else
Yeah.
you can do with it. What else can arise?
Yeah. What else are you being called to do that is being obscured by this fear that you have? Because usually it's based on fear. You are you are showing up. Instead of somehow being invisible in the background, you're daring to you're doing a painting, you're showing up. You're coming out of hiding.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a part of us that says, "Wait a minute, I don't like what I'm seeing here." I don't like the way my painting's turning out, and it says something about me, and therefore I got to get rid of it. So the challenge there is to accept what you've done, and to accept the form that you've given it, to accept your way of painting. It's
Yeah.
huge. It's
Yeah.
huge.
And I mean, if
So
it's not abundantly clear, it's not about the painting, right? It's
it's
not about
not
the
a
painting. It's about going on this journey and observing your individual reactions and challenges and overcoming them, because this process we're doing in every other context in life,
yeah,
whether it be career or parenting
yeah,
or anything, right? That's
yeah.
important. Our mind is going through all these processes subconsciously. So this is a
Anyway,
safe container to go through these
yeah,
processes in a way, in an environment where it's nurtured, and you have the space and time in a retreat environment to not be distracted by your daily life,
yes,
so that you can embark on this journey
yeah,
with a facilitator that can help you overcome
yeah.
the challenges that you put in front of yourself
Right,
in moving forward.
right. And you're not confused by emphasis upon success or comparison with other people or money, what it's worth. So it's a simplified environment, but that's right. You're facing all of the challenges that we face in life. It's just that it's taken and it's put into a context in which you can really work with it.
So if you were to, I like to encourage people before they go on a retreat to get in touch with the core intention of what they want to experience. Or
Yeah.
sometimes you go to a retreat and you just go with no expectations and you just throw yourself into it and you go for it. Um, if you were to provide guidance to people prior to going to a painting retreat with you,
Hmm.
if they wanted to sit and get in touch with the core intention in their life, what guidance would you give to them before coming?
Yeah. Um, don't do anything,
Hmm.
because generally if we say sit down and say, okay, I've got this painting workshop coming up, what is my core intention? I'm going to get in touch with it. um, it creates a vision, which you'll have of some sort, because you'll come up with some idea of your core intention, and then you'll drag that core intention with you into the workshop, and it may or may not be appropriate in the moment you're standing in front of your painting.
Mhm.
And so I don't do that. I don't want people to try to create
So
something.
the first lesson is, don't do the core intention. Like, start with a blank canvas.
The first,
No
it,
pun
the,
intended. Pun
the
intended.
yes, the first principle is not knowing,
Okay.
right? And so if you're bringing all this intention business, you know too much. You're going to be stuck with it. So be willing not to know what you're doing. Be willing to not know what you're going to do. Be willing to not know how you feel. Be willing to stand up there in front of the painting where everybody else is doing it, and let it be in the actual momentary experience.
In your experience, why is that important in life? Why is it important as a human for me to be able to start from not knowing?
Because that's the source of our greatest wisdom. We don't know that. We don't trust that. We rely on knowledge. We rely on past experience. We think that we have to be prepared, like we have to have our core intention. And the whole point of the painting process to recognize that the immediacy of being present is all you need. There's a tremendous depth. You are accessing the intelligence of the universe by being willing to be present. And you have to be therefore vulnerable, because you're not shielding yourself by some sort of self-image or some sort of knowledge, and you're vulnerable, and in your vulnerability you are spoken to and through,
Mhm.
and something comes to you and it gives you one step at a time, and it has your best interests in mind. You find when you do it that what comes to you, the experience you have in each painting, is somehow there's some uncanny intelligence behind it. It's not just random stuff that happens, but there's a way in which there's a deeper intelligence that's actually running the show. And the challenges that it brings to you are meant first of all, they are doable, or they wouldn't show up. And number two, they are meant to move you internally into a bigger space.
Mm.
And so it becomes more of a spiritual practice then, rather than an art practice. And you recognize that the practice of process painting accelerates your own development internally incredibly. And so then often the next challenge that comes up in the work is wanting to overly interpret it. Having had some sort of experience, having had something show up, and there's all this energy and you're kind of amazed by what you've done, the mind would love to rush in at that time and decide what it is, why you've done it, what it means about you, and what you're going to do next because of that. And so there has to be this willingness to not pick up that mantle of the one who knows what he's doing because you've done this, and to stay in the innocence of the momentary experience. So you
So, what
don't.
would you say to someone who completes a painting to whatever extent, and then excitedly rushes over to you and says, "Hey, Stuart, come look what I made," seeking validation? I'm asking
Oh,
for a friend.
I'm happy with it
I'm
to do
asking
that.
for a friend.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. And then I say, hey, I'll walk up and say, how did you feel doing it? And they'll say, it was really cool. And I didn't know what I was doing. And then I found the red, and look what the red did. And I'll validate the experience,
Mm.
not the result. And I first came to that work, I first started doing this working with kids, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. And of course they would do something, and then they would want validation, because that's kind of what they had learned already from their parents, which was, is it good? They bring it up to
Mm.
me. And I learned that if I said anything was good, they would repeat it forever.
Yeah.
They wouldn't, they'd lose the thread of their own creativity. So I learned that I learned how to validate them for the doing rather than the product. And how excited I was about the fact that they did this, and look what they did this, and it must have felt really good. But it's not like it's a good product, good painting. It was like they were good for doing it. It's a whole different deal. And so they took the emphasis upon trying to please the teacher by making a nice painting, but by having a good time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it's all about. So so there was this whole, and these principles that I'm mentioning kind of grew out of the experience of working with children and adults and watching the different stages that people went through and where they got stuck, and kind of what they needed to, what that stuckness was about, how that stuckness was a door.
How does
Could
stuck?
be,
What do you mean? How does that manifest in the
well, for
process?
example, if they interpret their painting too much, they get stuck,
Mm.
because once you interpret your painting, then you know what it says. So anything you put in it next has to fit with what your interpretation is,
Becomes a
right?
benchmark.
It becomes a benchmark, and then you're
Yeah.
then you're then you're stuck and tied to the interpretation, and you lose your freedom, and you also lose your energy. As soon as you lose your freedom, you lose your energy, you lose your enthusiasm for doing it. And so my, kind of the gauge throughout the whole process is the energetic of the experience, because when somebody is in that open place and they're listening and they're responding to what's coming, there's a huge energy. It just you can see it in the posture, you can see it in the way, in the movement back and forth to the painting, you can see it in the relative quickness of their getting the color and coming back. But when they get in their head through any of these things that we're talking about, they get paralyzed, and they end up standing there looking at their painting like, oh my god, what do I do next? Because they've jumped on board of one of these interpretations or some aesthetic idea. So my job as a teacher then is to kind of come and to kind of drag them back to the moment and say, hey, well, let's just play now. What would you do if you weren't afraid to mess it up? What
Mm.
would you do? because usually when someone's stuck, they're afraid to mess it up. They don't want, they kind of like it.
They're getting attached to the outcome.
It becomes precious, right?
Yeah.
So I say, hey, what would you do if you messed it up? And all of a sudden there can be this whole spark of energy again, because they would, and then I would, if they were going to do it, I would have them mess it up respectfully,
Mm.
which means adding things that might change it. You're not sure if you're going to like it, but you're going to respect everything that's there, which is really important. You don't just cover it up. And so it's built on this kind of quality of honoring yourself, honoring what you've done, but taking brand new leaps in it.
That's so fascinating. Respecting what's there. So not being attached to it, but respecting it.
Yeah,
I thought that just sort of shifted in me because I can imagine me having dominion over this thing that I created rather than respecting it.
yeah,
So I didn't have a I respect thou relationship to my creation because it's my creation. I can do whatever I want to it. And so I almost had a superiority to it. And so that's got to be interesting to sort of create something and treat it as now its own entity, its own
yeah,
thing
yeah,
that's distinct and independent from you,
yeah,
but then also wanting to contribute more to it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's an important relationship, isn't it? That respect. You can kind of get the sense of it. Because if you don't respect it, you can decide, oh, I think I'll just turn the painting into something else. Or I don't like this part, I'm going to cover it up, and maybe what I'll do next will be better. And when you do that, you lose ground, because you had approached it originally with an openness, with a sensitivity, with a willingness to experiment. And essentially what you're saying is that wasn't good enough. And therefore my being was not good enough, and I'm going to redo it. And say, no, you've done it, we respect it as it is. You can add to it, but you don't change it.
Mm.
And that takes that's a challenge, but it's what happens if you don't respect it, you end up losing your energy. You become less interested in the whole process. You're not even ready to start another one because it's no more fun, and somehow there's a way in which the rug has been pulled out from underneath you.
Yeah.
So if you respect what's there, and despite the challenge of it and despite your judgment, maybe you are going to work with it, and then the doors can open again. And then we get to the last principle, which is really completion. How do you know when you're complete?
Mm.
Because if you want to get away from the painting because you're judging it, you're not complete. If you want to get away from it because you think it's kind of silly and whatever, you haven't really stayed through to completion. And the completion is a place in which you're open and you're listening. You're not trying to override some feeling that you're having, and you're not trying to escape anything. And very often we want to be complete because it's become too precious, and we like it. Can be the opposite of judging. It can be that, oh, I like it. That's a special painting, just the way it is. I don't want to touch it again because it's so perfect. That's also not a completion. A
Mhm.
lot of the time there's something more. The completion, you can see, then becomes an inner completion rather than the painting.
Would you call it like a sense of satisfaction? Is it related to satisfaction? Like, okay, I'm satisfied with this now, or is it like
Yeah, but
the sense of
notice
completion is an internal thing?
it's an internal
Okay.
thing. It is a level of satisfaction, but it's a spiritual satisfaction. It's not, oh, I like the painting, it's a cool painting, therefore I'm satisfied.
Mm.
No, it's because you have listened authentically to your own inner road. You've given it form. You've stayed until the end of it. You're willing to go on. You're not, you're not attached. You're willing to go on, but you've come to the end of the road. It's an internal completion. It's a way. It's a state of being that you reach.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge then as a facilitator, is to notice whether is a person really done here. Have they reached that state internally of completion, or are they trying to override something? Are they trying to get away from something, or are they attached and trying to preserve something?
So you've become attuned to that, to sense that in the participant, so you can coach them to, why don't you stay with it, keep going a little bit more, or like, okay,
Yeah,
this is good. So you can sort of
yeah.
tune into that.
So that's one of the agreements in the work, that people, before they take their painting off the wall, they talk to me or whoever I'm working with, so that they can have this conversation about completion.
And then is there, clearly this has ramifications to bring back into life. Do you discuss sort of integrations or learnings and takeaways?
Well, of course, that's really the point of it, isn't it? It's not about painting.
Yeah.
And so we do talk about it. It's not like we need to, uh, how should I say, we don't need to point it out directly, because people are going to meet different challenges in their lives, and there's no way to kind of quantify that. But the principles apply. And so when a person gets more comfortable with staying with their own discomfort rather than avoiding it, and looking at it as a creative opportunity rather than something wrong,
Mhm.
the ramifications of that are huge, and how they roll out in your life, right? How they unfold. It gives you more permission to be with all these different aspects of yourself. It also gives you more permission to not know. Very often we're afraid of looking silly or stupid because we don't know what we're doing. But when you realize in painting that how rich that is, then you feel more confident in your life to not know what you're doing, to be a beginner.
And then what about the letting go process?
Letting go of the
When it's
result.
complete, yeah, when it's
letting
complete,
letting
letting go of
go.
the thing.
Yeah. Well, think about that. What Look at the mess we get in when we cling too long to something, to an idea of who we're going to be in the world, to the idea of the way we should respond in certain situations when it doesn't feel like natural to us,
Hmm.
or in relationship we cling. And to realize when something has, and what does it mean to actually bring it to completion rather than abandoning.
Hmm.
So they're huge lessons, I think. But so painting in a way is a microcosm, right?
Yeah.
It's a way to face this process, which is living process. Everyone's dealing with all of these issues, right? It's a way of doing it in a context that is, how should it's unconfusing. It's, in other words, if I were to say to you, paint for process, but we're going to auction your painting off at the end.
Changes the entire context of it.
Yeah, yeah. So, or we're going to give first prize, second prize, and third prize. It totally, so it creates a clean environment.
Well, we're already living in that every day, so I don't need to go to a retreat to do that. Like, I was thinking, this is such, in the context of retreats, this is such a break from our day to day life,
Yeah,
where every day feels like I wake up and I problem solve all day.
right.
Especially as an entrepreneur, my everyday job is
Yeah,
to problem solve and problem solve and
yeah,
problem solve and fix things and keep things
yeah,
aligned and organized. And it would be such a break from that, to take some number of days, and just like dive into this space.
yeah. Yeah, that's really what the retreats are about. And when people come, you get to put your life aside for the time being, all of the pressures that you carry, and you get to play.
So how does this fit in? I know you do local events, but how does this in Oregon now? And how does this fit into the destination retreats where you're traveling? How did that come
Well,
about?
I just came back from 2 retreats in Costa Rica. I was there last week, and um, so they're all the same work, really. It's all the same thing. But the nice thing about a destination retreat is you get cooked for, and you get a place to be, and there's all these cool people that are doing the same thing, and you're away from all of the influences at home. You're away from all of the pressures, a lot of the
Mm.
pressures of being at home, with your work. So it kind of is a vacation from all of that, and and then you get to explore uh, in that way. But for
You mean
decades, I have
explore the area, or you mean you explore in
ex-
terms of staying with the process over
explore
an extended period of time?
the inner area, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
internal reality of your own impulses, and learning to distinguish between what um, is a creative impulse and what is a repetitive impulse, and getting a really good glimpse of your own judgments and how you shut yourself down through doing that, and what it really means to bring to completion, and sensing the possibilities within yourself that then you carry away from the experience after you're and how they might unfold in your life.
Yeah.
So I think stepping outside of your life to do a retreat kind of gives you an experience like that. But most of what I've done have been classes, like weekly classes, where people, and I do those now online. But I'm also getting ready to do some here, but where you integrate it with your life. So you come out of work, or whatever
Mm.
your structure is, and you come to a painting class, and you then
Online,
have
online.
online.
How does that work? You have your own supplies at home, and then we.
Yeah, you have
Yeah.
people have their own paints, and they have a place where they can paint, usually on a wall. And they set up their computer so I can see the wall. I can see what they're doing. And usually, there's a group of people, 10, 12, 15 people that come, and they're from all over the world. And we do a quick intro, and people say, "Hey, I'm so and so. I'm here wherever I am." And then we start work, and some people have been working on something, so they've got a painting they go back to. Other people are starting fresh, and I work individually with people, and the difference is that everyone hears everything, of course, because they're
Mhm.
all in the same room. Well, they're not in the same room, but they're in the same virtual room, and so it's very rich because you're hearing the challenges that other people are having, and you're hearing the conversation that comes out of those challenges, and you're seeing the breakthroughs that people are
Yeah.
having. And so it's something in which you feel supported in what you're doing through what other people are doing. It's very cool.
That's an interesting experience. In the workshops and retreats that I've been on, in group work, everybody's kind of sitting around in a circle. And if there's a one on one interaction
Yeah,
or a healing session, everybody's kind of like paying attention and giving them their attention.
yeah,
So I'm guessing that in this context, is it that everybody's working on their own paintings, and then if
yeah,
one person needs one on one help,
yeah.
people are like listening in the background, but they're still working on their own thing? Or do they
Yes.
all kind of turn around and sort of pay attention to the
No,
monitor
no,
for a
they're all
while?
working. They all continue working. And if there's something relevant they hear in the conversation, it'll affect what they're doing.
Oh, interesting. That's a cool context.
Yeah. When it became possible to work online and I started doing it, I didn't know whether it would work or not. I've been doing it in person for decades, and it was like, can this really work online? And I was really surprised about how well it works. And for this very reason is that it's almost like there's a mingling of psyches. And it's not, you're not just sitting there listening to what somebody else's process is. You're painting. You're engaged. You're asking yourself the same questions in front of your painting that they're struggling with in their painting. And so when they have a breakthrough, or something opens for them, can open for you too.
At times, are people having emotional things come up that they process in the moment too?
Yeah,
Yeah, of
yeah.
course.
And the processing occurs in the painting more than in the talking. It'll come up in the talking, but it's not like I would have them stop painting and then work with them emotionally. I would have them keep painting, and I would have them find a way for that emotion to take form in the
That
painting.
doesn't include tearing it apart and catharsis and like taking a
Well,
knife to it.
yeah, so that happens. Of course, that's happened a lot, but that's a learning moment too,
Yeah,
because ripping up the painting is destructive.
yeah. Where are we now? Where did that get you?
Didn't get anywhere.
Yeah.
It's not even, it's maybe superficially cathartic, but it's not deeply instructive. And so there's another way. When you're feeling that degree of frustration where you might want to just rip your painting off the wall, could you paint the rips?
Mm.
What color would the rips be? Where would they be?
And express it rather than acting it out. It's
Expressive
not about
rather than,
repressing.
yeah,
You're still expressing that anger.
yes. You're giving form to that feeling,
Mm.
which is expressive and creative. And you're trusting then that that feeling came for a reason. It's not something to be getting rid of, even. That intensity of that desire to destroy is actually a creative force. And that if you honor it through finding a way to respectfully express it, it's going to reveal itself at a deeper level. And it's going to be something that can be really helpful to you rather than disturbing.
So it's not about don't feel that. It's about feel it and express it in a creative way, in
Yes,
a productive way.
exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah.
That's got to be a very transformative experience to be
Oh,
able
yeah.
to
You
process
know,
emotions in constructive and productive ways rather
yeah,
than tearing it all down.
yeah. And rather than trying to work it out verbally
Mm-hmm.
without the concepts and all of the things attached to it. So it's very visceral, it's very somatic, and and it's very, when somebody's going through that, everyone kind of is aware of it because it's intense. And there's a deep respect that they're all holding that space for that person. It's really interesting. And their painting is being influenced by the other person's intensity as well. So there's kind of a group energetic. There's the individual respecting the individual's energy and where they are and their emotion, but there's a group energetic happening too
Mm-hmm.
that supports the whole thing.
Is this useful for processing loss and grief as well?
Yeah,
Do some people come and
yeah,
process loss and grief?
oh yeah, yeah. Somebody has died recently. There's been a loss or end of a relationship, a pet even. To paint their dog who just died takes
Mm-hmm.
some guts, right? Because you're afraid it's just too much to feel,
Mm-hmm.
but you have so much love for that being, and you find that by choosing the right color and painting the fur and seeing the eyes, there's a whole process you go through in which you are coming to terms with that loss
Yeah.
and expressing it by expressing your love. So it's quite beautiful.
Or even a career or life transition.
Yes.
Going through life transition and learning the process of like, how do I redefine myself? And
Yeah.
this is a process that to practice. I guess at
Yeah.
some point, I'm getting, as we're having this conversation, I'm getting flashes of like some Buddhist concepts. I'm getting some flashes of some Hindu concepts. And um, I can imagine going through this and becoming a practitioner of this and coming back to the blank canvas every time,
Yeah.
going through that process.
I think it's very rooted in a lot of the traditions. There's a lot of it's not it was not formulated from those traditions, but the overlap is pretty amazing. And it's really about non-attachment, and it's really about developing a spiritual relationship to letting go and dealing with all the life challenges. And so loss is huge, right? If you've lost your job or you're in a transition like that, and there's fear and there's not knowing, to step up to it
Mhm.
visually, right? And to find a way to move towards that which you're afraid of. It's very cool.
Yeah, amazing. And ultimately, I think we're all pointing at the same thing. All these traditions are
Yeah,
pointing us all in the same direction
yeah,
with
yeah.
different paintbrushes.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah,
Well, listen, Stuart, this is great. I could keep talking, but I know that we don't need to get into the details of what you're offering. This video will be posted in different places on your different listings on Retreat Finder. So Stuart has a collection of offerings, an assortment of offerings of local events, destination retreats, and all that information. The details and logistics of that will be down below in the listing itself. but I wanted to give an opportunity to introduce you to our audience and to have them get a sense and a feel for who you are, and potentially a window into what an experience with you might look and feel like. So thank you very much for taking me through this.
Thank you, Amir. I appreciate your interest, and I could see you were getting it. You're ready. Hey, you're ready to do some painting, I think.
I think so. I think maybe I
Yeah.
need to invite myself down and come in for one of your retreats.
Yeah, or online, whichever way it works
Oh,
for you.
online too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, we're going to stay on. I'm going to end the recording here. We'll stay on for a few minutes and
All
wrap
right.
things up. But I encourage everybody in Retreat Finder's growing and expansive audience to check out Stuart's work. Go to the website, processarts.com. Check out wherever this video is posted. We're going to post this in different places with respect to the listings, and check out his offerings. So thank you very much, Stuart, and we'll see you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, awesome.